David Cameron has often been blamed for the Brexit impasse that caused years of political infighting after 2016's historic referendum, and unearthed accounts suggest his team were happy to take no for an answer when dealing with Brussels. Mr. Cameron's legacy, whether he likes it or not, has been shaped by one thing: Brexit. After calling for his party to stop banging on about Europe, he wilted and committed to holding a legally binding in-out referendum on Britain's membership of the EU. He did so while promising to renegotiate the UK's terms of membership before the vote, hoping that what he came back with from Brussels would be enough to persuade voters to stay in the bloc. History proves that what he achieved was nowhere near that, and analysis suggests this was partly down to ambivalence from his negotiating team. On February 19, 2016, Mr. Cameron arrived in Brussels hoping to negotiate new terms that would see changes to immigration relations, concessions on monetary union, and greater powers to national parliaments to block EU legislation. What he came back with paled in comparison to what had been promised. Tim Shipman recalls how senior members of his team were actively critical of the Prime Minister's strategy and believe he could have delivered far more. In his 2016 book, All Out War, The Full Story of How Brexit Sank Britain's Political Class, he notes that Daniel Korski and Mats Persson, the leads on EU affairs, Amit Gill, the director of strategy, and Max Chambers, a special advisor and speechwriter, all wanted Mr. Cameron to go big and not get all of it, get 8 out of 10. He quotes Mr. Persson saying, "The biggest mistake we made was that we treated it as an exercise in political management and a communication exercise rather than going for proper and fundamental change." However, Mr. Shipman makes clear that the problems ran far deeper than that. He claims Sir Ivan Rogers, Britain's permanent representative to the EU, and Tom Scholar, the Prime Minister's advisor on European and global issues, clashed repeatedly with Korski and Mats Persson. Mr. Persson believed Britain should push the limits of EU law to get change, and one minister reportedly noted that Mats felt we could go a lot further. One Downing Street advisor told Mr. Shipman, "We were too beholden to Tom Scholar and Ivan Rogers. They were the status quo. They were happy to take no for an answer, happy to believe things weren't possible when they could be possible. I've lost count of the number of times Ivan threatened to resign." Sir Ivan also clashed with special advisors over proposed reform to the European Court of Justice. A Number 10 source said Korski had a long-running battle with officials saying we needed to do something, and he kept getting told that it was impossible to do something. After 3 years of build-up, Mr. Cameron's gamble was close to failure. He came back from Brussels a broken man, celebrating a deal that was widely condemned by the British public as one that failed to match his promises. Richard Tice, co-founder of Leave EU, blasted, "The Prime Minister promised half a loaf, begged for a crust and came home with crumbs." Trending. Nigel Farage also lashed out at Mr. Cameron, claiming he had failed to strengthen the argument for staying in the EU. He tweeted, "This is a truly pathetic deal. Let's leave the EU, control our borders, run our own country, and stop handing £55 million every day to Brussels." And Conservative MEP Daniel Hannan said, "No new treaty, no powers back, and this is how Eurocrats teach us before we vote." Just months later, Britons voted to leave the European Union, and Mr. Cameron immediately resigned as Prime Minister.